Welcome to another episode of People Pod. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the stack of sources you sent us. Articles, chart data, historical retrospectives.
Yeah, there was a lot of material to go through for this one.
There really was. And our mission today is to unpack a really specific cultural flashpoint. We want to figure out how one of the most abrasive, bizarre, and controversial pop albums of the 21st century completely broke the music industry and rewired mainstream culture.
It totally did.
Right. So I want you to take a second and really imagine the kind of pressure that comes with being the absolute biggest pop star on the planet. The year is 2011.
A completely different era.
Exactly. And Lady Gaga has just released the defining pop albums of the late 2000s, which were The Fame and its follow-up, The Fame Monster.
Which were just inescapable.
Totally inescapable. She has the entire world captive. And everyone, her label, the critics, the fans, they all expect her to deliver another perfectly polished, easily digestible dance pop record.
Because, the formula for continuous easy success was right there on a silver platter. At that level of stardom, the standard industry move is to just hit, copy, and paste, maybe tweak the synthesizer tone slightly to sound current, and then you just collect your Grammys. Protecting the brand becomes the primary goal.
But she doesn't protect the brand.
No, she doesn't.
She releases an incredibly dense, chaotic, electro-metal pop opera, an album that somehow features mariachi music, literal church bells, an extended saxophone solo, and, faux German feminism.
Yeah, it was wild.
And to top it all off, the album art is literally her head photoshopped onto the body of a motorcycle.
It's such a pivot.
It's like imagining the anticipation for a highly awaited blockbuster movie sequel, right? The studio gives the director a blank check. But instead of giving them the safe, predictable sequel they wanted, the director goes completely rogue, makes this harsh avant-garde indie film, and it somehow still makes $1 billion anyway.
That is the perfect analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And to really understand the mechanics of how Born This Way succeeded, despite rejecting every rule of conventional pop, we have to look at where Lady Gaga was creatively right before it happened.
Right, coming off that huge 2009 run.
Exactly. She had completely dominated 2008 and 2009. And she described those two projects to the press as a yin and yang situation. The Fame was bright, satirical, hyper-focused on the culture of celebrity.
Yeah.
And then The Fame Monster explored the dark underside of the fears, the anxieties, the isolation. But looking at your sources, the internal team saw this third project differently.
How so?
Well, her producer, Redone, actually called it her Freedom album. And her manager at the time, Troy Carter, was actively warning people that her entire public image was about to transform. This wasn't just about evolving her current sound, it was about tearing down the facade completely.
Which brings me to how this thing was actually manufactured. Because she is arguably at the most exhausting peak of her career right here. She's in the middle of the Monster Ball tour.
Which was this grueling, massive global undertaking spanning from 2009 to 2011.
Right. And the notes here say she's writing these songs on tour buses. Then she's recording them in studios literally all over the world. London, New York, Vegas, Paris, Sydney, Oslo.
It was incredibly piecemeal.
But wait, I have to stop here. Writing on a tour bus usually yields exhausting, insular music. Because the artist is completely burnt out and disconnected from the real world.
Oh, for sure.
So how does someone write the anthem of a generation on a tour bus without it turning into a totally out-of-touch vanity project about hotel rooms?
Because she wasn't writing about her current reality. She was pulling from incredibly deep historical roots that really demanded urgency. She wasn't just, jotting down pop hooks while staring at a bus window.
She was looking backwards.
Exactly. Years later, for the album's 10th anniversary, she revealed the core inspiration for the title track and really the conceptual foundation of the album itself. It was inspired by Carl Bean.
Oh, the activist.
Yes, he was a gay, black, religious activist who released a radically defiant song called I Was Born This Way, way back in 1977. So she was channeling decades of queer history and activism.
Wow.
She took that raw, exhausted, adrenaline-fueled energy of performing for misfits every night on the road, and she just plugged it directly into the album's historical thesis.
And that raw live wire energy completely explains the sound of the record. Because if you look at the musical composition, she intentionally rejected the sleek, safe pop formulas available to her. This album is just a straight-up sonic rebellion.
Musically, she is pulling from a massive contradictory palette. I mean, you've got opera, heavy metal, rock and roll, electro-industrial, disco, house, and Europop.
It's all over the place.
It is. And the influences she cited in the source material are just as diverse. We're talking Whitney Houston, Bruce Springsteen, Prince, Iron Maiden, Kiss, Queen, TLC, and En Vogue.
I mean, those names don't even belong in the same record store aisle, let alone the exact same song.
They really don't, and that was the point. Let's look at the mechanics of the opening track, Marry the Night. Gaga actually gave this incredible quote explaining the architecture of it.
Oh, what did she say?
She said, "It's like Whitney, but imagine if Bruce Springsteen had a baby with Whitney Houston." That's what it is.
That is such a specific visual.
Right. She demanded this huge, soulful, stadium rock vocal delivery, but she placed it over a relentless, four-on-the-floor house beat.
And for the listener, a four-on-the-floor beat is significant because the bass drum hits on every single beat, right?
Yes, it mimics the human heartbeat at an elevated pace. It literally drives the human body to move. And then just to add to it, she layered actual ringing church bells over the whole thing.
It's like looking at a standard, safe pop music recipe, sugar, flour, vanilla, and deciding to throw in hot sauce, caviar, and pop rocks.
Yeah, it shouldn't work.
It shouldn't. In theory, the mechanics of those flavors interacting should completely ruin the dish. The acidity, the heat, the sweetness. But because she balances the ratio so perfectly, it creates this incredibly complex, addictive flavor.
And achieving that balance was grueling. Her co-producer, Fernando Garibay, revealed they revised each song about 50 times.
Wait, really? 50 times?
50 times. This wasn't chaotic experimentation, it was meticulous engineering. They were testing the structural limits of different genres to see just how much weight they could hold. Like Government Hooker fuses opera elements with a hip-hop beat and trance music.
And Bloody Mary features that Gregorian chant-inspired male choir.
Exactly. And Heavy Metal Lover blends techno with electro-industrial beats. And electro-industrial is not an easy genre to digest. It involves taking the cold, harsh, metallic sounds of factory machinery and forcing them into a dance rhythm.
Which is so intense for pop radio.
It is, but they labored over these tracks to make sure the abrasive new sound was perfectly calibrated.
Because really, all of this aggressive sound design was acting as a Trojan horse. She was using these massive, heavy club beats to deliver incredibly blunt, politically charged narratives. Oh. The music had to be loud enough to force the cultural conversation she wanted to have.
Absolutely. The tension between the album's message of radical inclusion and the intense backlash it received is the defining narrative of this era. Look at the title track, Born This Way.
Right.
Gaga was very explicit in the interviews you provided. She told Billboard she didn't want the message hidden in poetic wizardry and metaphors. She wanted it to be an attack, a literal assault on the issue of equality.
And the public response was immediate. It became the 1,000th #1 song in Billboard Hot 100 history.
Which is a huge milestone.
Huge. At the time, it was the fastest-selling single in iTunes history, selling over 1 million copies worldwide almost overnight.
So she has this massive history-making hit that acts as a literal, straightforward LGBTQ+ anthem.
But then, to follow it up, she drops Judas as the second single. A techno-industrial track about betrayal, which she described as being about honoring your darkness in order to bring yourself into the light. And the backlash to this was severe.
It was visceral, particularly from religious groups. The music video featured a modernized biker gang version of the biblical story, with Gaga portraying Mary Magdalene.
Right, and William Anthony Donahue, the president of the Catholic League, aggressively condemned her portrayal.
Yeah, he accused her of lacking real talent and leaning on cheap controversy to sell records.
And the friction wasn't just domestic. The sources outline major international government interventions.
They do. In Lebanon, the album was temporarily banned by the General Secretary Department, who deemed it to be mocking Christianity.
Wow.
Yeah, the director of the Catholic Information Center there stated they would not accept any insult to the Virgin Mary or Jesus. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, where homosexuality is a criminal offense, the government heavily criticized the album's stance on sexuality.
Because it conflicted directly with the country's laws.
Exactly. Radio stations across the country were actually ordered by the Malaysian government to edit out several lyrics from the title track because of that conflict.
The sources also note a track called Americano, which is this wild mariachi techno hybrid. She explicitly wrote that as a response to Arizona's SB 1070 immigration law.
Right.
It's just a fascinating mechanical use of a pop platform, taking a piece of state legislation and turning it into a global club track. But I have to ask about her strategy here. By releasing a song like Judas, with all that heavy biblical imagery right around Holy Week and Easter, wasn't she just intentionally poking the bear?
It's a valid question.
Like, was she sacrificing a smoother, easier album rollout just to guarantee she was on the nightly news?
A lot of critics leveled that exact critique at her. Donahue from the Catholic League specifically called her out for the timing around Easter, framing it as a cheap stunt.
Right, which makes sense from a traditional PR perspective.
Undeniably.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the broader mission of Born This Way, the provocation wasn't a side effect, it was the mechanism.
She wanted the heat.
She wasn't interested in a smooth rollout. She wanted the friction. Friction creates heat, and heat forces people to pay attention to the themes she was exploring: betrayal, dogma, sexuality, freedom. She was willing to take a massive hit to her own public relations if it meant the conversation was dominating the culture.
That strategy is exhausting, though. I mean, the shock value and loud beats grab the headlines, but an album can't survive on outrage alone, and that's where the deep cuts come in.
Oh, absolutely.
Beneath all that loud industrial noise, there is this incredibly raw emotional core to the album that anchors it.
The contrast is essential. Without the vulnerability, the industrial beats would just feel like noise. Look at the final act of the album with a song like The Edge of Glory.
That's a great choice.
It's this massive, upbeat electronic rock song, but the structural inspiration is deeply human. She wrote it inspired by the death of her grandfather.
Yeah, and musically, it features the soaring, iconic saxophone solo by E Street Band legend Clarence Clemons.
Which was actually his final appearance on a record before he passed away.
It's an incredibly moving piece of music, and then the album pivots entirely with You and I.
Yeah, a total shift.
It's a country rock ballad. It utilizes an actual sample of Queen's We Will Rock You, and she even got Queen's legendary guitarist Brian May to play on the track.
And then there's a track like Hair, which blends rock and heavy metal influences with a dance pop melody. And the entire song is just a sprawling metaphor for expressing your freedom and identity through your hair.
The emotional whiplash of this album is just incredible. It's like being at this dark, intense underground rave where everyone is wearing spiked leather and sweating through these heavy industrial beats.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, out of nowhere, the DJ completely stops the music to deliver a deeply profound, tear-jerking eulogy for a lost loved one. And then the beat just drops again.
High camp, deep grief, political rage, and massive dance beats all fighting for space in the exact same audio file.
And the culmination of that hype, the controversy, and the deep emotional connection resulted in a release week that literally broke the mechanics of the music industry.
May 23, 2011.
The numbers are staggering. The album debuts at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling 1.108 million copies in its first week. She became the 5th woman in history to sell over 1 million copies in a single week.
But we have to explain how a huge chunk of those sales were generated. The infamous Amazon deal.
Oh, right. This is crazy.
This is one of the most fascinating market manipulations in modern music. Amazon wanted to drive massive traffic to their newly launched Cloud Drive service. So they decided to sell digital copies of the entire Born This Way album for 99 cents for 2 days during that first week.
For the listener who might not remember the iTunes era, a digital album cost around $10 to $14 back then, so 99 cents is practically giving it away.
Exactly. Amazon ended up selling an estimated 440,000 copies this way. They took a massive financial hit, a loss of over $3 million. They essentially subsidized the cost of Lady Gaga's album to force consumers to download and use their servers. And it worked. But it exposed a massive flaw in how Billboard tracked success. Prior to this, Billboard didn't distinguish between a full-priced album and a discounted one. A sale was a sale.
So Billboard is suddenly looking at 440,000 practically free albums, inflating the biggest chart debut of the year.
And they panicked. It was so disruptive to the industry standards that Billboard actually had to step in and change the rules of how music is consumed and charted.
Because of this one promotion.
Yep. After this 99-cent stunt, Billboard instituted a brand new policy excluding any albums priced under $3.49 from their charts during an album's first 4 weeks.
She broke the literal rules of the Billboard charts. And the chaos wasn't confined to the sales strategy, it was baked into the visual presentation too, the album cover.
Oh, the cover.
Shot by the legendary photographer Nick Knight. It features Gaga physically fused into a motorcycle. Her arms are the front forks, her head is hovering over the handlebars. Only the chrome metallic text at the top says the album name. There is no mention of her name anywhere on the cover of the most anticipated album of the decade.
And the reaction to it was divisive, to say the least. Critics and fans alike were incredibly confused by the aesthetic. Shawn Michaels of The Guardian wrote that it looked more like a cheap Photoshop job than the definitive pop statement of the year.
But she defended it, right?
She did. She defended the image, explaining it was symbolic of her endless transformation, the fusion of human and machine, flesh and metal, which perfectly mirrored the electro-industrial sound of the record.
That division spilled over into the critical reception of the music itself, though. It sits at a Metacritic score of 71, which is good, but it indicates a lot of mixed feelings. You had outlets like NME praising her for pushing boundaries to the ultimate degree.
But then other critics called it wildly uneven, bloated, and an exercise in extraordinary excess.
Which makes sense when you try to digest everything we've just talked about.
Yeah.
But manipulating the market with Amazon comes with a massive hangover. In its second week, sales of Born This Way dropped by a staggering 84.27%.
Which was a record-breaking percentage drop at the time.
Was that cliff dive purely because the 99-cent Amazon promotion ended, or did the general public just find the album way too weird and aggressive to stomach after the initial hype wore off?
You really can't separate the two. But the Amazon effect is the primary mechanical driver of that drop. When you pump 440,000 nearly free albums into the ecosystem in week 1, the demand is artificially saturated. Week 2 hits a brick wall because anyone casually interested already bought it for $1.
That makes total sense.
However, the critical point you bring up about the album alienating people is totally valid. This was not the sleek, universal pop of the fame, the sheer excess of it, the religious iconography, the heavy metal influences, the abrasive synthesizers. It absolutely alienated casual listeners who just wanted another catchy track like Poker Face.
But alienating casual fans allowed her to cement a much deeper legacy. When you turn on Top 40 radio today or pull up a Spotify pop playlist and you hear heavy EDM synthesizers underneath a standard pop vocal, you are listening to the direct aftershock of what Gaga did here.
On a purely sonic level, Born This Way is widely credited with pioneering the integration of electronic dance music into mainstream American pop. The sounds that felt abrasive, metallic, and bloated to some critics in 2011 essentially became the undisputed blueprint for Top 40 radio for the next 5 years. And the cultural impact is even bigger than the sonic shifts. Fast forward to 2021, the album's 10th anniversary. She releases a reissue featuring covers by artists who are members or allies of the LGBTQ+ community. You have Kylie Minogue doing Marry the Night, Big Freedia covering Judas, Orville Peck doing a country road version of Born This Way.
And the city of West Hollywood formally declares May 23, Born This Way Day, painting the street with the progressive pride flag and giving Gaga the key to the city.
Wow.
The song's legacy as a civil rights anthem is a matter of historical record at this point. As an objective fact, on December 13, 2022, when President Joe Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act into law, which secured federal protections for same-sex and interracial marriages, Born This Way was played immediately at the White House.
That's incredible. To see a song that faced international government bans and religious boycotts a decade earlier being broadcast from the White House during a historic bill signing, it just illustrates the monumental shift in cultural visibility that the album helped foster.
And then, just when you think the album is safely encased in historical amber, the internet does what the internet does. In late 2022, 11 years after the album came out, the deep-cut Bloody Mary, the one with the plucked strings and Gregorian chants we mentioned earlier, goes massively viral on TikTok.
Yeah.
It was entirely driven by fans using the song to soundtrack Wednesday Addams Dance from the Netflix show Wednesday. It blew up so much it was officially sent to pop radio in 2023.
It proves how multi-layered the album's construction is.
Yeah.
There's the political layer, the emotional layer, and then there's just this deeply weird, theatrical, gothic pop layer that a whole new generation of teenagers connected with completely organically a decade later. A truly great record doesn't just reflect the time it was made, it anticipates the future.
It's like a time capsule that was actually a crystal ball. What seemed bloated or jarring to critics in 2011 became the absolute baseline for pop music and queer visibility a decade later. Bringing us back to where we started. Following up a massive, world-dominating pop hit is usually done by playing it incredibly safe. You protect the brand.
Right.
But Gaga used her peak fame not to secure her status as untouchable, but as a literal battering ram to break down doors for her fans. She sacrificed the easy, polished pop perfection she could have delivered and instead chose to create a messy, beautiful, and literal safe space for outsiders.
She proved that pop music doesn't have to be passive. It can be a challenge. It can manipulate markets, anger institutions, and demand that you look at things differently.
Which leaves you with a really fascinating thought to chew on regarding how we consume music today. We talked about how the Amazon 99-cent stunt broke the Billboard charts in 2011, but in today's streaming era where Spotify and Apple Music dominate, a stunt like that is mechanically impossible.
Yeah, you can't artificially dump 440,000 cheap albums into the market to force a cultural moment anymore.
Exactly. The infrastructure doesn't allow it. Which makes
Fine.
you wonder, can a modern pop star ever physically break the music industry's rules again? Or has the system become too controlled for another born this way to ever happen? Thanks for listening to PPEL Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.